I can't even believe where I've ended up. Like, I would never a year ago envisioned this is where I would be. And yet it seems so right. What would you do if you had nothing to fear? What would you change if you had nothing to lose? What would you pursue if you didn't care what anyone else thought of you? Welcome to the Have You Seen Me Now podcast. I'm your host, Sherilyn. Have you seen me now? Whoa, whoa. Have you seen me now? Whoa. Welcome back, you guys. Holy cow. It has been almost a whole year since the last episode. So I launched episode 8 in August of 2021. And here we are in June of 2022. Holy smokes. I'm not even sure where these last 10 months have gone. It has felt like the biggest blur. And also at the same time, it's felt like so much of life has changed. I really started the podcast like mid-pandemic, definitely still in the mask phase where you couldn't go anywhere without a mask. And so, you know, where I'm recording this now, we're kind of post-ish pandemic, back to like relatively normal life, which is surreal sometimes, you know, to think about this like blip on the screen of life, where we're going to look back at, you know, all these photos and videos and pieces of our life where we were living in masks and doing so much virtually. So it is a good feeling, you know, like I got to go back to, you know, a live show and, you know, go to a concert at an amphitheater, and just the feelings of like going back to doing just the normalcies of life. It's kind of been good. So gosh, it just feels good to get even back to doing this podcast. Like it just feels like maybe a little bit of a full circle kind of moment to get back to doing things that are creative outlets for me, are part of my creative process. I think even these podcasts are definitely part of my own self-discovery experience, part of my own self-growth. And I love that it gives me just this opportunity really to connect with each of you in just a special way. And so thanks for tuning in today as we kick off season 2, if you will. So today we're going to dive into episode 9 and really unpack how it started versus how it's going when it comes to where I was nearly a year ago to where I am today. And really the shift that has taken place was, for 25 years, I had been in vocational music ministry. So have worked for churches, led worship, managed teams, you know, mentored upcoming musicians and worship leaders, and wrote songs for the church. And it was a grand, wonderful adventure. But really, I would say around the time I started the podcast, which is really part of what made me start the podcast, was I was having these almost, you know, thoughts and feelings, and almost feeling, if you will, God like whisper to my heart, this, you know, that still small voice in your soul that I could do more even outside of the church walls than I could do within it, which was kind of a scary realization for me. And I had come to kind of find church to be a little bit of my, you know, security blanket. It felt like a safe place. I felt loved and accepted there. And, you know, in seasons where I kind of feel like I found my calling. But it started to get to where I could tell that this season was coming to an end, and that I needed to let go and take a total leap of faith and to take a risk and to dive into the unknown. So my journey over, you know, these last 10 months have really been coming out of full-time vocational ministry into being an entrepreneur, into starting my own small business, and I've really shifted a whole lot of my life. So stick around, because we're going to unpack where this grand adventure has taken me And gosh, even in the last couple weeks, you guys, there's been some craziness. So I had a power line pole fall on my car in the middle of the night. Yes. So I'm going to tell that story and a whole bunch more because that's just the tip of the iceberg, really. Oh, man. I keep telling my dad, like, I'm ready for life to be boring for a minute. Maybe. There's been a lot of excitement, but buckle up, everybody. If you guys have been loving these conversations as much as I have and want to help support the Have You Seen Me Now podcast, you can do so in several different ways. One is if you rate, review, subscribe, and share the podcast with a friend. Another is financial support, and you can do that at haveyouseenmenow.com. Thanks for listening to the Have You Seen Me Now podcast. Without further ado, let's dive back into our episode. All right, you guys. Sheesh, it's hard to know even where to begin today's story. Well, if you recall where I left off on episode 8, and if you don't, you can always go back and catch up. But, really, I was wrestling through a whole lot of deep inner stuff last summer. And I would say I'm still wrestling through a lot of my own walk, my own spirituality, and there's still a lot I'm unpacking. But I will say this, that I feel less tormented and more at peace. At peace that I made the right decision for me to take a step back from working in church ministry. I liken my experience almost to being like a soldier that had just been deployed one too many times. And I was pretty beaten up and pretty traumatized, and honestly did have a lot of PTSD that I needed to work through. And, I've shared very openly that I've been seeing a therapist, and she specializes in PTSD and trauma therapy. And I do something called ART, which I always forget what it stands for. But it has to do with your eye movements. And so it's one of those things where it's like when you're processing something that's traumatic, they'll have you kind of move your eyes back and forth. And there's something about the eye movements that help kind of reprogram your brain to let go of trauma and embrace peace and security. And so I've been, really gleaning some helpful tools when I have anxiety kick up, even when I've had some really traumatic situations recently that we're going to talk about today. It's like my trauma response does kick in when things happen, that I can feel it like bubble up, that PTSD stuff returning. And so it's been so helpful. So if anybody out there has struggled with a lot of anxiety or post-traumatic stress from either, just life, I feel like probably all of us have some PTSD at some level, right? But anybody who's gone through a significant amount of trauma, there's going to be residual stuff that may be somewhat in your subconscious, And I think a lot of it was for me for many years. But I think it was just a product of, the pandemic. And, there were some situations at the last few churches that I was at and went through, just some tough stuff. Tough stuff with some people on our staff. Tough stuff with, congregants upset about things. And I think that at a certain point, I just knew I wasn't going to be able to heal if I stayed in that environment. I really needed to remove myself from it to find the healing that I needed and the peace that my soul needed. And so I know without a shadow of a doubt that I made the best decision for my own mental health, spiritual health, physical health, because I was having physical symptoms. I think I've talked about a little bit of this in the episodes. I was having, heart palpitations, definitely having kind of panic attack type symptoms. I was having, dizziness. My blood pressure was through the roof, just insomnia. There was so many things. I was just so anxious, a lot of just emotions. So I was always kind of, choking back tears and having to kind of stuff my feelings down for the sake of the job, which was being on stage in front of people, singing, leading, speaking. And it was a lot of pressure, to go Sunday to Sunday to Sunday to Sunday and have to always be on your game and always hit a grand slam and always be smiling through your own pain and your own struggle and trauma. And so I am super grateful for amazing support, my friends, my family. A huge shout out to my roommate, DC, just to my dad, to my therapist, and just a loving community of people, even at one of my new workplaces at Gymnazo. Anybody from Gymnazo listening, just so grateful that I've been surrounded by very positive, uplifting, peaceful people who've infused that into my life. So it was really last summer that I was like, okay, I think it's time for me to take this step back, and decided to step down out of my full-time job. And then over the course of the next couple months into last fall, I kind of contracted and did, some music for some churches a little bit for a few months, and then kind of retired altogether. And so in the course of that time, obviously, we're still kind of mid-pandemic. It's not the greatest time to be job hunting or anything like that. And I think the biggest thing for me is I was struggling to feel a purpose to finding a job, wanting a purposeful job. That's probably a little bit of the Enneagram 4 coming out, that I want to have like a purpose in my vocation. And so I was struggling to, feel like I could find that purposeful vocation and way to use my gifts, because I felt like, well, gosh, if all I really know how to do is work for a church, how can I employ what I know in other ways? And so it began this huge kind of wrestling things to the ground for me to find the path forward, to find a way even to make some income and to feel a purpose and to feel that I'm still serving and using my gifts. And so it's been interesting to see how things have evolved. It's been amazing because I did start working part-time for a fitness company in San Luis Obispo called Gymnazo. You guys should go check it out. You go to gymnazo.com. It's GYMNAZO. And no, they did not pay me to say that. I just love them. I've been a client of theirs for over 7 years now, I think. And Gymnazo literally changed my life. I, struggled so much from back pain, and I had herniated discs and just a lot of dysfunction with I always end up with one leg a little longer than the other because of how I'm so much out of alignment. And so just a lot of struggles. And then even with so many years of playing guitar, even the coaches there would be like, it's like you have guitar shoulder, just like someone would have tennis elbow, right? And so I struggle with a lot of pain in my shoulders or pain in my wrists, or even for those of you who play like piano keyboard standing, you have one foot doing the sustain pedal. And so most often you're standing on one leg so your other foot can do the foot pedal. So whether I'm playing a guitar or, you're kind of cockeyed the way that you stand and hold a guitar, you're kind of cockeyed when you stand and play the keyboard. Like I was always kind of standing crooked for hours on end. And, strumming with my right hand and then doing the chords with the left hand and so forth. And so you just end up with a lot of, dysfunction and issues. And so thank goodness for Gymnazo, because they really taught me how to be a musical athlete and take care of my body before and after even being on the platform. And so I'm so grateful that I found Gymnazo. And so it's really cool that I have ended up working there now. And so I've been part of their team now for a year, actually. And I am part-time operations coordinator. So I'm doing all kinds of things behind the scenes, which ends up being very similar to the kinds of things I was doing in church ministry. So, I handle things from ordering toilet paper to merchandise we sell. I, schedule the coaches just like I used to schedule bands, that kind of thing. I'm assisting our CEO with his schedule, just like I might assist, our pastor with the church calendar or whatever. There's a lot of similarities. And what I love is, when things in my life were super stressful, I used to say, not always out loud, but in my heart, but eventually did share with people that in a way, really, don't tell anybody, but Gymnazo became more of a sanctuary to me than the church was, which was almost scary for my heart because I started to feel more cared for and more at peace within the walls of a fitness facility than I was feeling inside the church doors. And, I suppose it could be different for people who just attend a church. I think it's way different if you're a congregant and you get to, walk in the door as late as you want on a Sunday morning, and you could leave early if you want, and you can participate or you don't, you have all the choice. But when it's your job and you're paid to do it, and you're also paid to sacrifice as unto the Lord, right? A lot to ask of human beings because you're not only asked to put in the hours that they might be paying you for, but you're asked to make a lot of personal sacrifice for the sake of God, right? And so what I realized is over time, I was very conditioned to not care for myself very well because I thought caring for others was more important. As a staff person in the church, I was an employee who was worked to the bone, and that was my experience. Now, some of that I might have done to myself because I felt almost a self-pressure to perform at a certain level, to sacrifice at a certain level. If I was to look back now and, talk to some of my previous bosses or supervisors or pastors, they'd probably say well, I never wanted you to work that hard or whatnot, possibly. But all of that to say, Gymnazo kind of became my sanctuary. It became the place that, at least for an hour a day when I would go and train, I could tune everything out, everyone else's needs out, everyone else's schedule out, and I could just focus on caring for my own body. I lived for those sessions because it felt like, oh my gosh, I get to care for me for an hour. And I felt so cared for when I walked in the door. And so how interesting now that I get to be part of the team who gets to care for those walking in that door. And so it is similar, honestly, to, a ministry type mindset to really care for those who walk in the door, body, soul, mind, and spirit. But it's just a different environment. It's a little bit of a different culture. And I feel like what I'm seeing modeled, which I really appreciate, is a healthy work-life balance that's promoted even to those on staff, right? So when our CEO goes on vacation, they can fully unplug and know that the team has got it handled. And so there's that freedom for each of us if we're taking our time off that we are allowed to fully unplug. And I did have those moments in ministry. They were just very few and far between that I could really do that and have the freedom because, boy, Sundays come every Sunday. And it just felt like it was a constant battle. So that's where things kind of started to shift for me last year. So that provided me with, some part-time work, and it provided me with some purpose. And it was using a lot of my similar gifts, and in fact, Gymnazo has a podcast. You can go check it out if you want to. You can find them everywhere that you listen to podcasts. But their podcasts are really focused on trainers, and because they have a whole program to train other coaches that want to learn how to become movement specialists. So I promise this whole podcast is not about Gymnazo. But it's a huge part of my journey because it's like that's kind of led to where I am now. So part of what I do as operations coordinator at Gymnazo has been supporting their coaching program, which is called the Multi-Dimensional Movement Coaching Program. And so for any trainers that are wanting to be able to help the people they train understand their dysfunction and how they could maybe correct some of their dysfunction so that they could hopefully have less pain and more mobility and more flexibility, more strength, more power, just be able to live their life, pick up their grandkids, recover from injury, all those things. So if there are trainers who are wanting to learn more about how to do that, that's what they've created this program for. So I help support that program administratively behind the scenes. And what was really cool is, our owners really brought me on board to help with that program and supporting that program. And through the process, I was able to learn through taking a course about how to build a course. And so in learning how to build MDMC more as their mentorship program, I learned all these principles about building a coaching program and got to see it in action. And then, one of the owners was like, I could see you doing this with the music stuff you do. And I was like, oh, I had never considered that. Like, that's not on my radar. Now I've taught music lessons for years and years. Even right when I was in high school, I would teach flute lessons when I was in high school to younger students. So I've always had private lessons as a part of what I've done on and off over the years. Sometimes I've had as many as, 30 students when I was doing more of a full-time load. Like when I lived in Atlanta, Georgia, there was a season that I worked for a company that you were like roaming music teachers. In other words, folks would hire you to come to their homes to teach in their homes. And so I would have, maybe 5 students on a Tuesday afternoon into the evening, and I would drive from house to house to house to house. And I had my little route around Metro Atlanta. And so I had like a full load of like 30 students, would do, 5 or 6 a night. And that was quite the experience, right? So I've always done music lessons in different forms, but when I've been working full-time for churches, I would usually just take on a few students here and there. So I'm still doing that. And I love it. I love working with kids. I love working with adults too. I currently don't have any, but that's been a part of me being able to earn some income doing something I love and investing in young people and helping them grow in their own musical gifts. So that's part of what I've continued doing in this season, but I knew that I was going to need something more. And I knew that I had more to offer. And I would say maybe the last 5 years or so, I've had a few people that have reached out to me and asked for some coaching in some capacity. I had a wonderful woman that I met, really, I think it was through like worship leader retreats, through, the church that I was a part of, and that we didn't live anywhere near each other, but we did it all online, even before it was popular to do things online. But she said, hey, would you coach me in some songwriting? And so we would do these, virtual songwriting sessions. And then it kind of expanded where she's like, I want to build a website and I want to kind of work on my branding, because not only was she a songwriter, but she was a speaker and she would run conferences and she would do prayer meetings, whatever. So I ended up being where I started to almost be a branding coach, and we were doing kind of songwriting and artist development, brand development, and it just started to evolve. So I started doing that with a few people that would just see what I was doing as an artist and see what I was doing as a creative and ask, hey, would you show me how? And so that became a way for me also to build some revenue. So I started doing a little bit more one-on-one coaching. And so when, one of the owners at Gymnazo was like, gosh, I think you could do a mentor program of your own, like for songwriters. And part of me was like, oh man, there's so many programs out there. At least it feels like that in my space, because that's the world I live in. Like during the pandemic, I took an amazing course that talked all about, writing for TV ads and film and how to get your music placed. That's what led to me doing a lot of what I've been doing with my music the last couple of years. So that was amazing. But in that sphere, there's like so many people teaching different courses on production, courses on songwriting, so many courses related to music production and that type of thing. And I thought, what do I even have to offer that is different than anyone else? And definitely didn't feel like I had the capability to make it better than anyone else, right? But really what was cool about this course that I took to build a course was, and I was taking it for Gymnazo, to learn how to make our course the best course it could be and to help kind of advise our team on some things we could be doing. And I really only dipped my toe into the water. You know what I mean? But I think what happened was I was able to see it in action and how it's been so successful. Our coaching program for Gymnazo has been so successful, and we have so many coaches that have now graduated from the program and are doing so well and so pleased. And so I could see the possibilities, but it took me some time to dig through and go like, okay, where do I have areas, skills, knowledge, things that I've gained over the years that can be of service, that can be helpful, and what can I provide that isn't already out there? So that began last fall. I started doing a whole bunch of research, and part of what they encourage you to do in the program is to interview a whole bunch of folks in your sphere. So for me, it was the songwriter and worship leader, those in churches as well. And so I started to just ask people if I could interview them about their own experiences, about what they're wanting to do with their music, what their roadblocks are towards it. And through doing, I would say, over 50 of those sort of Zoom calls, I started to see those patterns, things kind of bubbling up to the surface and me going like, oh, well, I can help with that. Oh, well, yeah, I know how to do that. I could show you how to do that. I started to realize that there was a need. And that what I was hearing from a lot of people, they would say, well, like, I'm sure that information is out there online, but I don't even know where to find it or even how to search for it. I don't know the terms to use, or I don't even know what it's called, but I know da-da-da-da-da. So I realized that there was room for me to create really a step-by-step guide to help the new songwriter, the amateur songwriter who's maybe they've been writing songs for a while, or maybe they're brand new to songwriting and they feel a drive, a call, a passion to actually like record their music professionally and then publish and release their music and actually be able to build revenue and or have revenue that would help fund their ministry or whatever the picture might be, or have their songs sung in churches, or right, whatever the dream, their goal, whatever they're envisioning for their music. And because I've had so many years in church ministry, I did have a season that I was signed to a nonprofit Christian label, and I did a little bit of touring within the Christian music scene, and then had this season after that I kind of branched out as an independent artist, did kind of the gigging scene in Atlanta and toured a bit around the country, did coffee shops, restaurants, bars, festivals, wherever I could get into play, people's backyards. In fact, it was so sweet. Pam, if you're listening, your comment on Facebook today was so sweet. I had somebody who literally invited me in their home to do a concert, and I would always share, stories about my songs and my own journey. And so Pam had me into her home with a group of women, and I did an event at her place. And to this day, she's still on Facebook encouraging me to keep doing my thing. And I'm so touched, right? So I've had all these experiences of putting together tours and, starting my own small business and printing my own merch and keeping my own inventory and learning how to do state tax and sales tax and all the different things, that are required, really being that entrepreneur, small business owner as a solo artist and really being a self-published independent artist. And so I've just gleaned a whole lot of just random information over many years of lots of trial and error. but also having, good mentors, having other people in the Christian music business and beyond that would share tips, tricks, information with me. And so I realized, maybe I do have something to offer. Maybe I do have a way to serve. And so in January of 2022, I launched my very first 12-week mentor program. The program is called Release Music Like a Pro. And really the idea behind the course is to give songwriters the tools, the guidance, that step-by-step guide they need to be able to record, release, promote, and market their music, and also to set up the business side of things, from copyrights to registering for royalties internationally to public relations, trying to get your stuff promoted on playlists. And there's so many pieces now in the digital age that if you've never walked that path before, it can be very daunting and very overwhelming. And yeah, you can scour YouTube and potentially find the information you need if you know what you're looking for. But a lot of folks don't know, to register with a performing rights organization in their own country, but also to register with organizations like Song Trust or Sound Exchange, or maybe they don't know how do you end up on the Billboard charts? Well, there's this thing called SoundScan, and you have to register your stuff with SoundScan. So, it's just that kind of thing of helping people with all those pieces behind the scenes, helping people navigate even their branding, their colors, professional photos, cover art, websites, social media. There's so much, right, to being an independent artist. And if you're really wanting to step into doing it professionally with the idea of hopefully starting to build some revenue, build an audience, serve churches with your music, whatever the dream or the goal is. And so I love that I get to support artists of all different kinds. Like I said, whether they're worship leaders in a church and they want to release a worship album they're hoping will get, these songs sung in different churches, or they just want to bless their own home church. Maybe they're artists that are wanting to play more live shows and they're wanting to grow their audience so they can put together a tour. Maybe they're wanting to, how do I get on radio? How do I do radio promotion? Maybe they are wanting to get their music into TV ads and film. And they're like, how do you even do that? Right? So I feel like my course has ended up being really kind of like the beginner's course to that whole journey, from amateur singer-songwriter to professional published indie artist. And you guys, it's been so much fun. I finished the first round. My first cohort was January, February, March, and I had 10 students come on the adventure with me, and it's been so cool watching each of them just through that journey. It was such a fun community. We would meet weekly on Zoom every week and connect, and it was so cool. And it was really neat to see. I ended up with an international program because I had a couple students from Australia. I had one from New Zealand. I had one from Canada. So at one point in time, I think we were in like 8 different time zones. So scheduling our sessions was challenging at times, just trying to keep track of time changes and all that kind of stuff. But gosh, so stinking cool. And so I am now in the middle of my second cohort. We're getting ready to start the 6th week, so we're almost halfway through. And in this cohort, I also have a student from New Zealand. I have one from Ireland. And then some of my alumni from the first cohort have kind of continued on with us with the subscription package to be part of coaching calls and kind of continue their learning journey and support and community. And wow, I can't even believe where I've ended up. I would never a year ago envisioned this is where I would be. And yet it seems so right. And I had to take all these leaps into the unknown, not knowing where I would end up, but trusting the process. And little did I know that working for a fitness facility would end up being part of my journey to starting my own program. How cool is that, right? And I love that, the owners of Gymnazo are cheering me on and are so supportive of even what I'm doing to build my own coaching program. And then what's cool is the things that I'm learning in my coaching program, I can take back to them and be like, well, here's an experiment I tried in trying to drum up songwriters. We could try this as an experiment to drum up some more leads for coaches and, different things like that. So it's like what I'm learning at Gymnazo has helped me. What I'm learning in my own program is, I hope, helping Gymnazo too. So it's kind of been this wild experiment, and it's been so fun. And the other piece that I was kind of surprised to find is how much I'm loving coaching others and how much I'm loving seeing them light up and seeing the light bulbs come on, seeing the wind in their sail. Like just earlier today, we had one of our weekly, Q&A calls, and this is the week that we get to talk about branding and, choosing even your colors or what words really describe your music. You kind of start to dream about, getting to do that photo shoot and things like that. And it ends up being this really fun creative piece. And so it's just so awesome to see how much life it's all bringing to me by just taking all these things over the years that I've learned and sharing those with other artists to help them stand on my shoulders. And I couldn't be more thrilled and blessed and humbled to be in this space. And so I am looking to launch my next cohort in August. So if anyone is listening and you're curious to know more, you guys can go to releasemusiclikeapro.com. And that website will be in the show notes if you want to check it out. But it's a super fun program. And you can do it at your own pace, or you can, do it each week with the homework. And if you do it each week with the homework, by the end of the 12-week program, you'll release your first single. Or if you've already released music, your next single or your next EP or whatever your goals might be. But the program walks you through from having a demo that you've never recorded to having a finished product that's released and out in the world, and all the steps in between. So it's a super fun adventure, and I would love to be part of your musical journey. So I hope you'll check that out. So that's kind of where life has brought me. In this last year, I have really had a major shift in what I'm doing, how I'm spending my time. But what's interesting is even where I am at in the last couple months. So there's more to the story. We're not finished yet. If you need to, press pause, take a bathroom break. I don't know, grab yourself a LaCroix. I've got actually my water of choice lately is Waterloo. Have you guys done Waterloo? They're a little harder to find, although they're starting to be more popular. It used to be you could only find them at Whole Foods. It's like Snooty Water or something. But Waterloo, guys, the cherry limeade. So good. Also, the grape flavor, Waterloo. Oh my goodness. My mom used to love grape soda, and it'd be a treat. Once in a while we get grape soda. And anyways, it's definitely not as sweet and as crazy as the grape soda, but it reminds me of that. And so every time I drink a grape Waterloo, I think of my mom. So you guys check out Waterloo. So where was I? Oh, so the most recent season has definitely thrown me for some curveballs, because here I launched my mentor program in January for the first time, right? And so really, and I told the students taking the course, it was no secret. I'm this is the first time I'm doing this. I've coached a lot of people one-on-one, and I've done all these steps myself, oodles of times over 25 years. But this is my first time building a program, writing, resources down, creating slides and an online portal with links and graphics and all of that, right? So it's very time consuming. I can't even tell you how many hours I might have spent building the curriculum, figuring out how to order the steps as best I could. And so really I used that January cohort as a prototype and let the students know, like, I'm going to be learning from you as we go. You're going to be informing the content of the program really by the questions you're asking, where you're needing help. And I continued to tweak the program as we went. And so now that I'm doing the second version of it, the second cohort that I'm in the middle of right now, I've been refining it and continuing to try to get things dialed in, which has been super time consuming, but also really rewarding. So the goal is to get, it dialed into the point where it can be a little more self-sustaining and not be quite so time consuming, because really for the last 10 months, I've hardly worked on my own music or worked on, what I'm doing in trying to get my music into TV, ed, and film. I kind of had my songs signed by a couple agencies and they've been out there pitching for me. Life has become a little more simplified, a little more refined, a little more streamlined. So, I would say maybe 4 or 5 months ago when I had my program start and I thought, okay, I think I have proof of concept. I have some really happy songwriters that seem pleased with the program. They're learning from it. I've had, a couple of them release their songs and have had, them reach that successful moment that they got over the finish line, right? And feedback was great. And all that was going. And so I even was building a budget for my life and going, okay, a year from now, I think I can be out of debt and, my life's going to look so different, and then life happens. And so bless her heart, my roommate and I went out on a brunch date on a Saturday, just a roomy brunch out. And this was shortly after she'd lost her stepmom, and it was a rather sudden passing. And we'd been talking for a while because my roommate was looking to build a home near her father in Washington State. So I knew that was the goal. She had purchased some land, but we had been talking about it being at least a year out, maybe a little longer. And so that's where in my mind, I'm like, okay, a year from now, when she moves away, by then I should be able to support myself, not have to have a roommate to make it, or I should be more out of debt. And, I had an older car that I was holding my breath that it would hold together long enough. And I don't know if you guys remember one of my previous podcasts, me talking about how the wheels totally came off my car, right? So I've had some issues with my poor car, and it's just praying that it would hold together long enough for me to save up and get ready to buy another car. And so, we're both kind of choking our tears back when she says, I think I need to move my timeline up and move to be with my dad sooner. I'm going to move in with him for a while, and then I can be close to my building of the home and be there in person to oversee it. And I think that'll work well. And she's able to work remotely. And I knew in the moment, I knew this was the right thing for her. I knew it was the right thing for her family, her dad. There was nothing in my heart that felt like it was wrong at all. And I was, was supportive, am supportive. No, it was a good and right decision for her. But at the same time, I'm going, oh, shoot, oh, shoot, oh, shoot, oh, shoot, oh, shoot, in my heart. This wasn't the plan, Oh my gosh, how many times have you guys experienced that moment where you're like, this was not in the plan. I was not prepared for this. And so then I'm trying to not have a panic attack. There at Sally Lou's over my breakfast to not just have a meltdown, not because I'm not happy for her or totally supportive of her, but just my own PTSD and trauma kicking up that just when I thought I was starting to get out of debt, just when I thought I had a plan, just when I'm building my business, starting a business, seeing the path come together, now, oh my gosh, suddenly the game's changing again. Are you kidding? And so it's me shaking my fist at the sky, why? But I was okay, part of me was just well, what do I do? Except that day I started looking on Craigslist for places to live because I knew I couldn't afford to stay in the duplex that we shared. It was more house than I really needed. So I thought, well, I'm just going to see what's out there. It doesn't hurt to just start looking right away. But I was having a lot of again, these kind of PTSD feelings because 3 years ago when my roommate and I were looking for places, we looked at so many places. And I think I actually turned in applications at 20 different places. And we only ended up getting accepted at one, which is the one where we ended up at. And it was towards the very end of our deadline of we have to have a place so fast. And so I was just worried that I was going to have that same traumatic process again of trying to find a place that I could afford, that I felt safe, that, you feel like you find a good landlord who's going to take good care of you. And I come across this little beach cottage in Cayucos, which is about 30 minutes from SLO but out on the water. And you guys, really for 7 years, all the time that I've lived here in San Luis Obispo County, I have walked the beach and literally in my soul, I would be I would love for just a tiny home with a peak of the ocean where I could just write music and be at peace and live my happy life, until I'm old and gray. So when I saw this post on Craigslist of this tiny cottage with a view of the ocean, it's literally steps away from where I used to park and then go walk my favorite beach. And I just thought oh my gosh, it's this place is handpicked for me. But at the same time, I was oh my gosh, I'll be devastated if I don't get it. Or I looked at the price tag and I'm how am I going to afford that? But something in me was you have to try. You have to at least email them, right? So I emailed them and inquire, ask a few questions. Part of me was this has got to just be too good to be true. Maybe I was thinking oh, the pictures look pretty cute, but maybe in person it's a wreck, or it's going to smell moldy and damp, or the landlord will be scary, or the area won't feel safe, or, I started thinking all of these, all the negatives that I'm sure it's just not. Don't get your hopes up. Don't get your hopes up. Don't get your hopes up. So I email the Craigslist email and they email back pretty quick. And I asked, could I come see it this weekend sometime? And they're yeah, how about tomorrow? And I was okay. And so I came out here the next day, saw it in person, and met the landlord's wife. And she was super nice and super sweet. And she had staged the cottage with her own furniture and some decor. And it was so cute. It was very simple, but it was so cute. And, it made it feel cozy. And I could tell that, aesthetics mattered to her. So we bonded over all her cute things. And she told me how she finds everything at garage sales and stuff. And I was oh my gosh, it's we're, the same person. And I just was I literally was walking around the place in my heart thinking this is exactly what I've dreamed of. And so there was another person here at the same time looking, and she was very chatty. She's a chatty Cathy. I mean, she was nice, but she's just chatty. And I'm an introvert, right? So I didn't say much. I just kind of quietly looked around and opened closet doors and took some pictures. And the other lady's chatting her ear off and da-da-da-da-da. But I just was oh, shoot. And there's a few quirks because there's no garage. There was no outdoor storage. There's literally one closet. There's just the bedroom closet is the only closet in the whole place. There's not even a bathroom cabinet. It's this was meant to be just a cute little Airbnb or something and not necessarily long-term living. But it's the cutest thing ever. And so I was I'll make it work. I was this is perfect training for me, buying a tiny home one day, this is a great next step. And so eventually I had my moment with the landlord's wife and I just got to say, it's oh my gosh, this is my dream. I have dreamed of a tiny home by the sea. And But I was like so concerned if there's other interest and will they pick me, and financially, am I going to look good on paper? And oh my gosh, this is only the first place I'm looking. It's never going to come through. But I submitted my application that day, and the next day they gave it to me. And in fact, I heard when they called some of my references that the landlord's wife was like, it was like she was just glowing. There was something so, bright and light about her. And I just thought like, oh, how cool is that, that they could see the lightness and brightness in my heart and maybe see the excitement. And it just feels like meant to be, you guys. So about 2 months ago, I started the process, the very long process of having to go from a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage duplex with plenty of room and giant closets and so much room for storing extra things to a very tiny little cottage with 0 storage, 0 garage. And so it began this long process. And because my roommate was also having to downsize and get rid of a whole lot. So it was like us spending weekends out in the garage, going through every single box and tub and Christmas decor and trying to like trim, sell, donate, trash. I can't even tell you how many truckloads of trash that, we had to get rid of. And, it's just kind of crazy how much you start to collect. And so I think it was, a very challenging time for us to go through like everything we owned, like every single cabinet, every single piece, and kind of have to sort and go, okay, what can I get rid of? What can I let go of? What do I want to keep? What do I have room to keep? And it took time, man. So it was a very hefty process, but finally got myself moved over to the little cottage, and we got out of the other place. And then I helped, my roommate get her, storage cube loaded up with everything that would be shipped up to Washington. And so then had spent the last few weeks then like getting unpacked and trying to get settled here, and literally had just gotten settled and was like starting to catch my breath. And like, it was a Friday night that I thought like, oh, I finally have a weekend that I don't have to be unpacking. I can just have a weekend, right? I was so excited for the weekend. And so I go to sleep very late on a Friday night. And you guys, at 5 a.m., I felt what seemed like an explosion, heard and felt the loudest, most terrifying sound I think I may have ever heard. And when you're like still half asleep, and I kind of had this moment of like, was that literally just in my dream? Was that real? But it was terrifying because, obviously with all the like shootings going on and everything, I didn't know if I should hide or if I needed to get out. I'm like, is the house half on fire? Did the laundry room explode? Like, what's even happening? But what I did know was the power went out. And so then I was like, okay, well, if the power went out, maybe a transformer blew. I was trying to go like, I don't know what to do. But I was mostly worried about there being a fire somewhere. And I just had this sense of you need to get out. And so I didn't know what to do. So I grabbed a jacket, my purse, my phone, obviously, and my car keys. And I thought, well, if I need to like flee in a car or, then I can at least like get in my car and go somewhere safe or whatever. And so it was 5 a.m, so it was still dark. The sun had not come up yet. And I really couldn't see because the whole block was out, so all the street lights and everything was out. And so I had my little iPhone flashlight and I go around the corner of the house and I'm trying to like use my flashlight to see what's going on. And I don't see anything, but suddenly I felt something on my head, and I realized that a power line had fallen and I walked into a power line. So I freaked out and I was like, oh my gosh, the power line's down. Oh my gosh, And then I tried to go around the other side of the house thinking, well, if I can't walk through there because the power line's down there, I'll walk around the other side because I was trying to see if any of my neighbors are out. was trying to see like, do I need to call like the fire department? Do I need to call the power company? Like what's exactly happening? And so I try to walk around the other side of the building and I walk right into another power line, like into my chest. And I'm like, okay, I got to stop walking around because I can't, I mean, like even my little, iPhone flashlight, I'm obviously not able to see what's happening. And so thankfully around that time, some neighbors were coming out with flashlights because they had all been, startled awake with this awful noise as well. And so I hear someone shout, which actually was one of my neighbors I know really well. And she said, I called 911 and I called PG&E. And she's like, stay where you are. There's lines down. And I was like, yeah, I already walked into a couple. I'm like, thanks. And so fire department comes. And what had happened, you guys, is a fuse blew on one of the like power lines or whatever. But probably happened like earlier than that. But what had happened is that it caused a fire on the wooden power line pole. And then where it was on fire, the pole cracked in half. And then the power line pole fell on top of my car and like crushed the front half of it. And so a flaming pole fell on top of my car at 5 a.m. and that crash was what I felt because it literally was, let's see, maybe 50 feet from where I sleep. So I'm super grateful it didn't fall on me in my bed. That would have been so much worse. No one was hurt except my car. So a whole day goes by. It took them the whole day to cut down, the wires and get the wires out of the way. And then they had to bring a whole team out here to put up a new pole, to put up new wires. And the very last thing they did was pull the pole off of my car. A few days later, then I got it towed. It struck with so much force. Basically, there's structural damage, like to the firewall. There's like way more damage than, than the car is worth. And so then for the last week, I've been car shopping and I've been talking with my insurance, talking with the power company, trying to handle all of the logistics and all the crazy. So thankfully, there's a happy ending to the story. The last night I was able to pick up a new car. And so I feel relieved to finally kind of be through the process. Oh, side note, my TV also got fried. Thankfully, none of my recording equipment or anything happened, but there was one TV that wasn't plugged into a surge protector. And so that got fried in the process. So I had to get a TV replaced and go through like renter's insurance and all that jazz. Anyways, like I said, it's been an ordeal. It's definitely been an ordeal. But the moral of the story is I'm still here and I'm still breathing. And I still have a roof over my head. And I have a new vehicle to drive. Now I'm going to be, paying some payments. It wasn't like the totaled amount was enough for me to buy a great new car, but it gave me a good hefty down payment to put towards something new that will hopefully last me for many years. And so it's one of those things where if you're in a space in your life where you feel like maybe you feel crushed by a power line pole. Maybe you feel like you keep waking up to another trauma. I just want you to know you're not alone. Really, all of us have now been through a global pandemic that seemed to never end and we're still feeling the fallout from all of that, right? And so there's not just the moment the power line falls, but there's the PTSD, and then there's the dealing with the consequences of that happening, right? And so you're not alone if your life has not turned out the way you expected. You're not alone if your life has taken a massive twist and turn and where you're at right now is just not at all what you envisioned, or if maybe you're still in the thick of figuring out what the next step is for you. I just want you to know I'm in it with you. And so I think sometimes I just want to document the struggle with you, for you, and for myself, to remind myself, how it started and how it's going for me now, so that next time a power line pole falls on something in the middle of the night, I think that it's so easy to let ourselves think negatively, like, like me about this cottage, like, oh, it's not going to work out. I'm not going to get it, or it's not going to be as good as I thought. And so I'm learning more and more to let the optimist in me rise to the surface. Because I think I was more like that as a kid. I don't know if you were, but I definitely was. I think I was more of an optimist as a kid and more of a dreamer, even more of a risk taker. I mean, I was like the kid who was like on the playground, like flipping off of swings and taking all kinds of even physical risks. I was like super like daredevil-y when I was younger, and I would do anything. I wasn't afraid of anything. But as I got older and my kind of spirit got beat down and beat down and beat down and beat down by, oh man, whatever, by bullies in school, if you heard my episode 1, and by my ex-husband, and unfortunately by some leaders in church environments and things. And you could start to take that on and have that suffocate you, or even from rejection when you try to get your songs placed in TV ads and film, and none of them have landed yet. But I can't even tell you how many stories I've heard about artists who had to pitch their song hundreds of times or over the course of 10 years. Do you guys know that song, I Can Only Imagine? I actually got to work with the radio promoter who was the radio promoter for that single. He worked one of my songs for a little while. This was like a decade ago. And I did have a little bit of radio success back then. But he told me the story. He's like, I worked that song for 10 years. 10 years he pitched that song. He believed in it that long. And it finally broke. And then it became a super popular song in the Christian music world. And I think that's the thing. It's like we can so easily give up after 1 no, 2 no's, 3 rejections, 5 rejections. Like, how many rejections does it take before you just give up? And I think that's a little bit of where I was sitting, like how much bad news, how many more trials, how many no's, how many rejections, how much can it take before I just say like, enough is enough. But I think I'm in this space now of like, I don't know if it's ever enough. Like, if I believe in myself and I believe I have something to offer, and I believe my music has something to offer, and I believe my program has something to offer, and I believe I have something to offer as a coach, and I coach one-on-one clients, and I coach in a group setting, and I teach private lessons, and I started a podcast, and I'm dreaming of writing a book, and all these different things that I'm putting out in the universe. Like, I'm just one girl, one woman, one person doing what I feel made to do, and expressing myself and expressing my creativity and sharing my story in hopes of it encouraging other songwriters, other creatives, for each of you to do what you love doing, and do it whether you get yeses or nos or whatever, but doing it because you love it, right? Like I'm up here doing this podcast all alone in my new little cottage because I love documenting this journey, and I love sharing it with you. And I could have, my dad will probably listen. Hi, Dad. My roommate will probably listen. Hey, DC. I know that I have a handful of folks who may listen, but that may be it. But you know what? That's enough for me. Like, I'm not necessarily doing this in hopes of ever having like millions of people. I mean, if that happens, great. But it's like, for me, this is satisfying. This moment right here, documenting my journey, my story, and knowing that I get to share it with some people I love is meaningful and fun, and I'm enjoying it. And so I just want to encourage you, as we kind of close our time here today, to just like take a little self-assessment and allow yourself, if you need to, even like journal it out or whatever, but like to kind of take that stream of consciousness in your thinking and go like, what are the things that really bring me to life? I always joke that if it's making cinnamon rolls, oh my gosh, then make the cinnamon rolls and make lots of them and give them away and sell them and whatever, right? Like, I have actually my best friend from childhood, like best friend from like first grade, like she loved to bake. And she, like, whenever she had free time, she used to bake. And I've been watching from a distance now. Lori, I don't know if you'll ever listen to this podcast, but I watch from a distance and I'm cheering her on because, you know, she started like selling some of her cookies, and I think she does cinnamon rolls and like muffins and I don't know, all kinds of stuff. Like took what she loved doing and realized it was a blessing to other people. And trying to get to is like get into a space in my life that when I wake up in the morning, whatever it is I have to do, I look forward to it, right? I look forward to recording a podcast. I look forward to coaching my mentor program students. I look forward to going to Gymnasio and getting in a workout. I look forward to going to Gymnasio and supporting the amazing team there. I look forward to going to piano lessons and working with my adorable students who are rocking it. I look forward to coming home to my beach house and hopping on my cruiser, right? Like I look forward to walking the beach with my toes in the sand. And I look forward to taking way too many sunset photos. Like I'm trying to have it be where I look forward to the life I get to wake up to every morning, because I spent way too much of my life dreading waking up in the morning, dreading the next day, crying as I'm getting ready in the morning because I don't want to face the day, crying as I'm driving to work because I don't know that I can get through another day. But then sometimes crying when I would come home to an empty house because I'd be surrounded by people, even at church and stuff. But that when I would come home, it would be so lonely. And I'm in such a different season of life now where I live alone. I don't have a massive social life because the pandemic kind of like killed most of any social life that remained. But gosh, you guys, I'm so happy and content. And it doesn't mean that I don't crave friendship and I won't continue to seek that out. And I hope that I can build a community of friends here and have more of that. I hope that I can find more creatives that live in my area. Maybe we could even do some songwriting together or whatever, right? So I'm not saying that I desire necessarily to be a hermit for the rest of my life, but I have reached a place where I'm content with my own company. I'm at peace being on my own. And that's a beautiful thing. Like I enjoy my own company. And it's taken me a long time to get there. Maybe that's part of being in your 40s. Maybe someone else can attest to this. Maybe it's just part of the age that I'm at. But I love my own company. And I finally have really embraced the season of singleness that I've been in since my divorce. There were so many years it was so hard to be on my own. But I love the freedom that I have, and I embrace that. So I feel like it's like hard to turn off my talking tonight. There's so much to say, but I'll save some for the next podcast. So I just hope that you found some encouragement today. No matter where you are in your journey, it's never too late to totally reinvent yourself. It's never too late to pursue your dreams. So what would you do if you had nothing to fear? Right? And what would you change if you had nothing to lose? And what would you pursue if you really didn't care what anyone else thought of you? And my hope is that you'll find some courage to take some steps in that direction today, and this week, and this month. And I'm cheering you on. That's all I've got for you today, guys. I want to end today's episode with a song I wrote in the midst of this crazy, wild journey. And really, it's a song kind of like celebrating this journey that I've been on of like going from self-doubt to finally liking this new kind of me. And so I look forward to seeing you again soon on episode 10. If you enjoyed today's episode, it means so much to me if you would share it with a friend, share it on social media, send it to someone you know who might need some encouragement. It would help me if you would rate it, give me your 5-star ratings, post your reviews. All of those things just help other people to find the podcast, be encouraged by it, help our community grow. And it does absolutely help if you feel inspired to financially support what I'm doing over here in my little beach cottage by the sea to try to be an encouragement and of service with my gifts. You can send me a note at haveyouseenmenow.com or make donations there as well. So without further ado, until next time, I hope you kind of like this new kind of me.
Lost myself somewhere along the way. Fight to breathe, keep getting tossed by the waves. Why do I care what they say?